So, as you can see, I'm in a tent. My family and I were camping out over the weekend. It was a little bit chilly, but it was a lot of fun. Bit of an adventure in this crazy lockdown time. In the book of Exodus, which we've been looking at during morning prayer, and also we were looking at before we had lockdown in the morning services, Moses and the people knew what it was like to be in a tent. They were they'd escaped from Egypt and they were camping in the wilderness, and so for them being in tents would have been very normal. But when I did my last little thought like this, I thought with you about the beginning of Exodus chapter 33, where Moses goes outside of the camp to go and meet with God. God was on the outside and the people looked in. And then we thought about the fact that later on in Exodus, when God established the tabernacle, God came into the heart of the camp and into the heart of the lives of his people. Now, a little bit later on in Exodus chapter 33, it's very interesting because as Moses meets with God, it says this. It says, "The Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend." The Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. Now, I think over this lockdown time, many of us have been really understanding with fresh eyes the value and the importance of face-to-face contact. Even those who are used to technology and do online stuff all the time, I think we're all realising just how much we need that face-to-face contact. When we're out in the garden, various people walk past on their walks, and it's great, we chat to them, obviously, at a safe distance. But people keep saying, more than anything, we miss that face-to-face contact, actually seeing real people. It's all very well seeing somebody through a screen like you're doing with me now, but we want to see people face to face. It's a great thing, it's a privilege, it's how we were designed to be, isn't it? And I'm sure there are many people at home who haven't got access to technology, either because they just don't have it or they're not able to access it, who will be missing that face-to-face contact even more, especially those who are on their own. Now, I think when we think about that, when we think about our feelings to do with desperately missing that contact, especially maybe if you are unfortunately having to cope and live through this on your own, I think the words that we read in Exodus 33 are even more amazing. So in verse 11, it says this: "The Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend." The Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. That's extraordinary, isn't it? A few verses before, we've already seen that God was separate. He was outside the camp. Everybody looked on. And yet Moses was able to speak to God face to face as one would speak to a friend. Those people must have looked on, the rest of the people, God's people must have looked on as they stood at the entrances to their tents, incredibly enviously. Moses was meeting with God face to face, like a friend. The holy, mighty, perfect God. The God who cannot be in the face of sin. Moses was meeting with him. Wow, they must have thought, that's amazing, I want that. And they get a little bit more of a taste of that as the tabernacle is introduced and God comes into the heart of his people. But nonetheless, there's still that separation between God and his people, because God is holy and they're sinful. But you realise that when we know Jesus, when we meet together to worship, when we fall on our knees in prayer, when we open our Bibles, we're speaking to God and listening to God personally. And also we have the wonderful hope that in the future, in heaven, in the new creation, we will meet God face to face. That's what we've got to look forward to. So with all this pandemic, with all the fear that there is, we don't need to fear in the same way. Because through Jesus' death, when he rips the temple curtain in two, makes access to God available, we can meet God face to face in heaven, and we can know God personally now like a friend, just like Moses did. And as people looked on enviously, some people today are looking on at Christians and going, what is it that they've got that I haven't got? Apparently a statistic in a newspaper said that a third of, I think it's 18 to 30 year olds are accessing online church resources at the moment. That's amazing. People are wondering, what is it that Christians have got? Well, we, through Jesus, can know God personally. That's a massive privilege. Think how much you want to see people in the flesh now with this lockdown. Well, that's number one, how much some people are desperately looking for an answer and looking for God. But also, number two, that shows how much of a privilege it is that we can know God through Jesus, that we can hear him speak as we read his word, and that's amazing, that we can come before him and speak to him through prayer. I hope you find that a comfort, and I hope you find that helpful. Thanks.